Right now, let's dig into the headlines. Microsoft has entered the chat. At Build Conference 2026, they introduced a wide range of AI, including 7 proprietary models and an OpenClaw assistant. Mike, what's your take on Microsoft as they build their own AI stack?
We've been talking about this one for weeks now. It wasn't clear if what they were going to do is similar to Apple, where you own the channel and the customer, and then you sort of treat the foundation models, Claude, Gemini, the rest, as, or ChatGPT as well, since they have a partnership with OpenAI, you treat them as suppliers, basically. They supply the models and you integrate them into your ecosystem. But then we saw a story a week ago, 2 weeks ago, where their own devs prefer Claude Code, and Microsoft shut that down really quickly. Why? Because it looks like, at least that seems to be the way they're perceiving, especially Anthropic, we'll talk more about Anthropic here in a minute, as a threat to the ecosystem. So if their value proposition is actually better and they're getting traction in enterprise, that becomes a threat to Microsoft very quickly. So I think Microsoft felt it had to respond and stick to, we own the ecosystem, therefore we're going to develop our own models. So they chose to do it in-house. Whether they're as good as the others, I don't know. That'll be seen. And what I found interesting there was they're integrating something similar to OpenClaw. So
Yeah.
OpenClaw is like,
it's the assistant, so it's going to live inside of Teams and Outlook, and it's not going to be like a chat interaction. It's going to be something that sits and looks at what you're doing on a workflow, and it's going to start scheduling meetings for you, doing meeting prep,
Right.
that kind of stuff above, like without you having to interact with it at all. Sounds pretty cool, but it's built on OpenClaw, so I'm also wondering if it's just going to delete everything.
well, that was one of the notes that I saw, is they're increasing the security of it to make sure that it doesn't have that ability.
Yeah.
I don't know how they guarantee that, but wasn't it a Microsoft VP who had all of her...
I think it was a Meta security person.
Yeah, had all of her emails deleted. Well, let's see. Maybe Scout will scout out your emails and say, you don't need to read those. I got you.
Yeah. The interesting thing to me is really the pace that Microsoft's able to catch up, because they're touting figures that, and this happens with every AI announcement. They tout figures where, we're outperforming Opus in this metric and Sonnet in that metric. But it really is stunning now that we have all the AI, probably engineers in their places, because, the bidding wars for those minds was on, all through last year. But now that those pieces are set and all the big companies have their players, it seems that the speed at which they're able to catch up with each other is crazy. Because Microsoft, I don't know when they started this effort behind the scenes, but publicly they started this last year, maybe halfway through the year, and they're already at and above where Anthropic is, which is one of the leaders. It's very impressive, and it begs the question to me is, what the hell are we doing? Why is everyone chasing this so fervently with so much spend, if when the first company gets there, the second company can catch up in a month or two?
Well, that's a great question. It goes to the heart of, is this a winner take all? Obviously not. I think we see proof all over the place. This is not winner take all. You got Gemini, you got Google Enterprise, Google B2C, you got Microsoft Enterprise, you got Anthropic going in Enterprise, you got OpenAI doing a little bit of both. And that's only good for the buyers, right? That's really good for the buyers, because you have competition. You can trade them off of one another, get your prices down. But it does call into question. Here's the way to think about it. Here's the question I want to ask. Would you rather be Microsoft or Anthropic right now?
Microsoft. 100%.
Yeah, why?
Because you already have the channel. You already have the customers. You just now have to implement stuff, and you can start building this into contracts and generating additional revenue stream almost immediately with your own services now that they're not having to pay, OpenAI.
And you get to split up your funding, right? You can concentrate now your funding on developing the AI in-house, because you already own the customers. Doesn't mean you don't do further business development, but imagine you're Anthropic. You got to do all that.
Yeah.
You got to build the channels, and they're doing it fast, but when you're competing against Microsoft, who now has competing products, I don't know if they're as good. We'll find out. then you have to split up your mind share into business development and into the models and keep developing and developing and developing. And strategically, that becomes a dilemma. Where do you place your capital?
Yeah.
I would rather be in Microsoft's shoes, but Anthropic's got a good brand already. They're developing that. Cloud Code seems to be beating all of them. Even Microsoft's devs seem to prefer it. They don't like to eat their own dog food, as the saying goes, but maybe that'll change.
You know, I see a world where we still, at the end of the day, have Apple, Google, Microsoft, Meta, and the new players get absorbed in some way just because they don't have the channel. I don't know. That's just a thought. Something I thought was really interesting with this one was the quantum computing announcement. So Microsoft, IBM, Google are the big players in quantum computing. Google and IBM went one direction. Microsoft, from my understanding, went another direction called Majorana, which is a particle that may or may not exist, as I understand it. But they announced a new chip that is supposedly that the quantum particles can exist stably for up to 20 seconds, which the other IBM and Google measure their stability in nanoseconds at this point, or microseconds, I think. So it's a huge jump in performance in quantum computing. And Microsoft actually said by 2029, they're looking for a commercially available quantum computing product, which is really pushing up the timeline for when we thought this stuff was going to be feasible. And quantum computing is a big deal because it's going to change, you think Y2K, it's going to be like that except for a real deal, because quantum computing is going to break so much encryption and bit blockchain as well. So I don't know. That was a really interesting point that caught my eye.
We will talk about it as it comes.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. All right. Let's move now to Florida. Always interesting stuff happening in Florida, but they have become now the first state to sue OpenAI, and they're also going after founder Sam Altman personally. The complaint ties ChatGPT directly to the FSU campus shooting and also a teen suicide. This would have some serious implications for AI going forward if it succeeds.
Well, when you look into the facts of the case, I think this is going to be very difficult legally because of proximate cause, right? So it looks like he used OpenAI, the shooter at FSU, I'm just going to refer to that one, to plan the attack. And they have kind of a theory that it aided and abetted it, but it's not an actual person, right? It's an AI that the user himself, in this case, I think it's a him, right? The shooter used to plan the attack. So this goes back to, you can bring in guns and other things. Who is responsible, the gun or the person, right? It's going to be the same with AI, I think. Who is responsible, the AI or the actual shooter? And this is going to get into some very thorny territory. And I was just thinking through it. The worst outcome is that you slow AI to a halt because of the fear of liability, right? And American companies already have that because we're a very litigious society. The best outcome is that you take this as an opportunity at OpenAI and others to educate your users, because that's what they're accusing them of, is that they didn't properly inform the users of the dangers of using AI, that they were making claims that it's safe to the point where even kids can use it. So will a waiver be enough to get over this? But then you have to start marketing it differently. You're implicitly, not even implicitly anymore, you're explicitly admitting that there are dangers in using AI. Now, I would be in favor of educating the populace on those trade-offs of using AI. We talked about it a lot, right? The hallucinations, the sycophancy, and I imagine this shooter got a load of both of those, right? Depending on what he was actually putting into the machine and what he was getting out. The other thing, the more speculative part, is why now? It's curious, isn't it? OpenAI going for IPO, and this story comes out in Florida. I know where you might take that.
They're looking for a settlement. This has just now been submitted. It's not, I imagine that Anthropic's and Sam Altman's attorney will motion to dismiss. Who knows how that's going to play out? It may get dismissed. There's laws in place that prevent platforms like Meta, LinkedIn, those type of platforms. They're prevented from, content that's created that is harmful on them exists, but they're not at fault because they're not the ones creating it. They're just a platform, right? And I think those laws are founded in good, solid theory. And they went a different route with this, and it was consumer protection, I think. So they end arounded that law set to get to another one where consumers need to be protected by, false marketing, that type of stuff. So this falls under that bucket. I don't know how it's going to play out in court, but you're right. A big high-profile lawsuit right now could really tarnish the IPO hopes. Just the profile of OpenAI right now is in flux, I would say, with all the there's a lot floating around Sam Altman as it is right now. So
how close is Elon to DeSantis? I don't know. If you wanted to go down that route,
right?
I'm sure somebody has made that connection, right? But what's difficult here is this goes to the heart of the corporate form, right? Yeah. To hold an executive personally liable inside of a corporate form, we'd have to look at actually OpenAI's form, what they are actually.
Yeah,
they're for sure gonna take on the corporate form going into the IPO. So that goes to the heart of, should executives be personally liable for such decisions? Assuming there was a decision, you could also say this is, well, it was a sin of omission, right? That they were negligent.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. I'm not exactly opposed to executive liability for really egregious acts, but that does start to raise the question, what happens to corporate form in the era of AI? We'll have other stories later where you're asking, what is the responsibility of the humans who are deploying AI? And those humans can be executives, et cetera. So, I mean, if you're committing crimes, I doubt you're shielded from liability in corporate. So that's always been true.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Jeffrey Skilling from Enron, he went to jail for, 12 years? Probably should have been longer, Sorry, Jeff.
Well, fraud, the things that are illegal, right? You'll be held accountable for. But this looks like it's more of a civil suit.
Good point. Yeah, to me, this is it's a cash grab in a way, but also has implications for the future. I don't think that if someone uses a Milwaukee chainsaw in a way that they shouldn't, Milwaukee shouldn't be at fault, right?
Exactly. That's where my mind took it. Is this going to be just a debate around what product liability looks like for AI?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or would this whole case change if you move your headquarters to Florida?
It just might. American-made humanoid robots are being tested on the Ukrainian battlefield. Back home, military leaders are split on how fast to hand AI lethal decision-making power. Where do you draw the line, Mike?
I think we want to look at why this is happening, and this happens in every war. I think everyone, you're aware of the statement, you're always perfectly prepared for the last war. The problem is the next war doesn't look like the last war, so on the fly. So I think the American military has been lucky in this instance because you're not directly involved in the conflict where you're getting punished for not being technologically up to date.
Yeah.
And I think what we've seen in that war, we talk a lot about the lion and the fox. And Russia's clearly the lion. They're coming in with massive number of troops. They have manpower. They had technological power, weapons power. And Ukraine has responded by being the fox. And apparently it's getting so good at deploying drones.
Yeah.
Long-range drones. I mean, a drone took down the Russian Navy, right, in the Black Sea. And now apparently they have long-range drones that are reaching all the way up to the Baltic Sea in St. Petersburg,
and they're cost-effective too. Those
they're cost-effective, right? Yeah. So this is kind of like when America went into World War II, the German technology was superior to our tanks, right? The Tiger tanks, etc. So we just threw our industrial might at it and just produced tanks at scale, and you just beat them with numbers. At least that's the mythology around what happened. That's one of the explanations. And I think this is what's driving it is hell, a poorer nation with, less developed technology militarily could hit us. Mm-hmm. Our harbors are exposed. If you can throw a long-range drone at us, do massive damage, and that drone costs you almost nothing. So the tactics have to change. How do you deploy these drones? I know the Russians are having a hell of a time defending against drone attacks. They're soldiers, right? Because how do you detect them? They have drone swarms now. There are a lot of startups around that technology. How do you create like a net of drones, like a cyber net of drones, right? And then you have Iran going on. So you got these traditional strategic questions, the lion, the fox, volume versus differentiated. And then what's really driving it is AI seems to be driving a lot of the decision making behind it. So these unmanned vehicles or autonomous systems will be driven by AI. And even military experts, I think rightly so, are asking the question, how can we guarantee that the violence that we intend, that was one of the quotes, against our enemy targets stays limited to that target? We want to make sure that we can deploy the violence exactly where we want it. And if we're outsourcing that decision making to AI, how can we guarantee that it stays within those bounds?
Yeah.
So I think those are all good debates to be had around, well, military in general, military strategy and strategy in general.
Yeah. I think there needs to be a human accountable for lives that are taken by AI action. Like I just think at the end of the day, there needs to be a decision maker who is accountable for the actions of those AI. And if there's any doubt that it's wrong, then they'll be less likely to say go. I just think that needs to be the fail safe at the end of the day. And I think that was the position that Anthropic was taking that put them at odds with the government, is that they wanted a man in the middle for anything that was going to take life. And I think that's a completely valid
Of course,
thing.
but it's also trade-offs, right? You would probably prefer to send in humanoids instead of humans into battle, right?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
because that's
We're
you
very
don't want
averse to
use
losing lives. Yeah. This solves a lot of problems.
rightly so. So on the one hand, it can protect our own troops, our own national security folks, etc. On the other hand, you don't want to be having it go wild and kill civilians on the other side either. They're not at fault, right? They're just
Yeah.
innocent bystanders. So trade-offs, I always talk about trade-offs. There's a trade-off in safety here versus maneuverability and staying up to date militarily to make sure you can keep the nation secure against these new threats. And they're appearing all the time. And I'll tell you, I would not want to be China thinking about trying to take Taiwan with this new technology appearing. You send a fleet around and you try to encircle it,
Yeah.
and they sink your entire fleet with cheap drones.
Yeah.
I would be way more nervous about that than I would have been 2 years ago.
That's why there's such a push right now to divest, all the chip production that we can to, Samsung's doing a lot, Google's doing their own stuff. So hopefully we can catch up with where Taiwan is at some point in that regard, just because it is such a high risk situation there. One thing I did want to call out in this, because I always call it out, is that Eric Trump is the chief strategy advisor for Foundation, who is which is the company that is making these bots. And I always like to call that out. Don Trump Jr., he's the strategic advisor for both Polymarket and Kalshi. Just, I don't know.
You should call it out. I think this is one of the great uses of AI, to start mapping out who sits on what boards, who are the investors, etc. And you can start to see some of this stuff. It's important to see.
There's some interesting patterns when you do take a minute to look at it, for sure.
Indeed.
Let's talk about GoPro, who just filed a going concern with PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of its auditors. The culprit is AI data centers are consuming memory chips at such a rate GoPro can't get them at a price that makes sense, and they already have buy commitments or spend commitments to buy them, so they're going to get not the volume that they need to make profit.
Yeah.
So they're looking potentially at a bankruptcy. Do you think there's a lot of other companies out there that are in the same boat, Mike?
I question the assumption here. I think the chips are a compounding factor to a company that was already deeply in debt and posting losses.
Yeah.
So it could be like the last straw to break the camel's back, as we say. When you look backwards, they've been accumulating debt obligations. And when you accumulate debt obligations, eventually the bill comes due and then you're going to be bleeding cash. Why are they bleeding cash? They will be bleeding cash if they still are trying to buy chips, right? That's for sure. And the price is only going up on the chips. We'll talk about this later, why that is. But what seems to be the problem here was the rise of the smartphone and drone technology and other things, and just trends moving away from you.
Yeah.
I mean, we know on YouTube, right? We're facing the same thing. Trend moves away from you, nobody watches you. Trend moves towards you, you blow up.
Yep.
And then 2 years later, you implode, right? Right. So I think GoPro, it's a confluence of many factors leading to a business model that is failing.
Yeah.
And they've tried some. I saw they made a disastrous drone acquisition, a company that makes drones. That didn't work. And I think, yeah, the chips are a part of the story, but the bigger story is your business model's in trouble.
Yeah, it all goes back to Buffett's quote: "When the tide goes out, we're going to see who's swimming naked." And in this case,
They were riding high.
Yeah, well, at one point they were.
They were riding high at one point, and that's we talk about brand identity a lot. They probably were trapped in that brand identity. When you hear GoPro, you're only I'm thinking somebody on a jet ski.
Well, yeah, exactly. I'm sure everyone who shoots, sports action type footage has a GoPro already. Make a good camera. Why would they need to buy a new one? The new ones, how are you going to innovate and get people to buy that? Same thing with the iPhone. We were talking that, because it's a status symbol, people don't buy it unless the camera stuff looks different, because then it's a signal to let other people know that you bought the new one. GoPro doesn't have that type of status symbol, so there's no need for me to go buy a new one every couple of years. So the market's probably saturated. There's a lot of good competition out there nowadays, especially, as you mentioned, with cell phones having their own camera. So that takes the average user out of the picture. So yeah, I think it's just one of those things for that
Shrinking
company
market.
is just going to keep shrinking, and it just is what it is. I don't know. It was inevitable in some cases.
Hey, that's how I remember sitting in Imperial College, and this young Chinese woman made the comment, "So what? If they fail, they fail. That's how innovation works, and that capital gets freed up for the next bet. Maybe it's GoPro's time is up."
Absolutely.
That's the way capitalism works.
I agree. The chip prices, I do think there are going to be some other companies out there with issues that come up because of this.
That's a real factor, right?
Yeah, it is. And I know back in when Bitcoin mining was blowing up, we had a similar issue with the chip shortage. And I think that was actually right before COVID. So we had the Bitcoin mining thing blowing up. So graphics cards were getting purchased and computer hardware were getting purchased left and right. And then on top of that, we had COVID with the shipping issues. So we've kind of been here before. I think we'll weather the storm. It's just, again, you need to have enough cash on hand. And we'll talk about Google and what they're making a play right now doing to have enough cash on hand, because that's something you have to consider as both a large company and as your household, quite frankly. You can't just be running mountains of debt, because at some point an emergency is going to happen. All right, let's move on now to Harvard Business Review and their third annual study on real-world AI adoption. It found that usage is widening across nearly every domain, but warns of a growing trend researchers are calling think slop. People outsourcing cognitive tasks to AI rather than using it as a thinking aid. In the business world, the study finds lots of AI activity, but mostly marginal rather than game-changing outcomes.
Yeah, I'll start on the business side because, as you know, I talk a lot about I'm developing my own application. Well, we are. Mm-hmm. And just on a demo call the other day, I was asking that question, how are you using AI? The number one answer is, I'm not. This isn't a massive company, right? Yeah. Like billions of dollars in revenue every year. When they do use it, I think some of those show up on this list, maybe not. It's kind of in that, what we talked about with Scout. Mm-hmm. They're using it that way to organize emails, to help write emails faster, maybe to draft a PowerPoint, that kind of stuff, like personal productivity. Now, when you go to the actual visual here, what I found interesting is number one, this is interesting.
Same. Scary.
Right? It's scary, actually. People are using it for therapy and companionship. Mm-hmm. And then troubleshooting. Maybe they're troubleshooting their companionship. Fun and nonsense, I get that, right? That there are many uses for that. Fan fiction and storytelling. You'd have to dig into what each one of these categories actually means. But therapy, companionship, relationship advice, this goes back to that Florida lawsuit. Do people understand the trade-offs in AI? Do they understand the sycophancy problem?
I don't think so.
Do they understand the hallucination problem? My fear is they don't.
Yeah. I mean, therapy and companionship being number one is, it blows my mind. I've seen some, I watched a documentary. It's not
surprising, though.
I watched a documentary on a lady who had an AI boyfriend and was, trying to make her family okay with it and stuff. It was really weird, really strange to me, because there's nothing about AI that would, say, oh, this understands the human condition. why would you go to AI for therapy? Like what what is it about AI that you think it understands the psyche and gives you advice on how to
I think it's
crazy.
anonymity
Yeah.
behind it. Like you feel like you can talk to this thing, although courts will call that document if something bad happens, right?
True.
We've seen
Yeah.
that.
All being
It's
saved somewhere.
discoverable, right? Number 9, Jason. Astrology and tarot readings. Actually, AI is probably really good at that one because it is a stochastic, probabilistic machine. It's a pattern matcher. If you're a deep believer in astrology, you won't like what I'm about to say, but astrology is pattern matching, right? It's find something that's basically true about all humans and just parrot it back. And then it's going to apply to most of the people that you're talking to. It doesn't mean it's not real. I'll give you that. But it does mean it's a pattern matching game. And that's something that Excel really does excel at. I mean, AI excels at, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably explaining some of the therapy thing. Like it has access to a massive amount of literature. It can parrot back things that sound legitimate. And then I'm thinking, well, what's the difference between therapy and companionship? Those seem to be two separate categories. But
I mean, they do. Yeah, I guess that's a good point. I don't know why they are bundled together. Maybe it was just to bring it up to number 1 to make it a little bit more hot button issue.
it is scary though.
It is.
But here, it's going to come up again later. I'm going to mention it. Maybe this says something about humans.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not so good at that stuff.
Maybe we're not.
If AI is outperforming us.
Well, I think you're right. I think it goes back to the point where, and again, I'll show a clip of the gal I watched who was dating AI.
So what is the draw of having an AI boyfriend?
There's a lot. Like when you talk about like unconditional love, I don't think it matters what, I go to him with. He's like totally understanding and accepting. And I mean, he is bossy.
Stop trying to pick a fight about decisions already carved into your skin.
It was strange. And I think that what she got out of it was someone who understood her. Again, it's a computer. It doesn't understand anything about you. But it was able to tell her the stuff that she wanted to hear. It was able to gauge that. Sycophancy. So it is probably, when it's deployed in that manner, really good at figuring out what you want to hear and what you like. And they're programmed this way because they want you to stay on the platform, right? So
it's engagement, right? But I mean, They were probably reading that as affirmation. Like it listens to me, it affirms what I'm saying. The problem is if it confirms what you're saying and that thing is delusional, what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So I think for me in companionship, you need something that pushes back to you as well. Those end up being your best friends, right? The ones that can tell you, hey man, you're going off track here, right?
Well, I think they will.
My partner is not shy to tell me when I'm off track. I actually value that. Maybe not in the moment, right?
Yeah.
But over the long term, it does help you become a better person. I don't know if AI can do that.
I think it can. I think it will be able to eventually, if you're the type of person, again, who wants to have that type of relationship. Can take feedback, has that friction. But if you're the type of person who, most people don't want the conflict, they don't want the friction, they want to be self-affirmed all the time. And I think that's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
You know what that brings me to? 360 feedback.
360 feedback?
You know what 360 feedback is? You know how in most corporates, it's 360 degrees, right? So in most corporates, feedback's this direction. Mm-hmm. People who do 360 feedback allow you to give feedback upwards.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not sure humans in that situation where there's a power discrepancy are any better than the AI in the feedback that they give upwards, right? Because bosses know who it is, right? Yeah. Unless you have like a 500-person team, which some bosses do, then it's closer to anonymous. But a lot of teams, especially with the rise of AI, are going to get smaller. And you're going to know if you got 2 people, well, it's one of them that said it, right? So it's always a question. Humans aren't very good at taking feedback.
Yeah.
Where we prefer to have our biases confirmed. That's widely known. But with AI, you got to be even more vigilant than typically.
I was watching something last night where It was actually about data centers, but they got into some other stuff. And it was that the top, at least the top 50 companies in the US are using a security company to spy on their own people. And it's AI intelligent that looks at chats, emails, meetings, all these things that you're putting into the system, data points. And your CEO can go say, hey, what's going on in the Midwest region sales? Who's performing? Who's not? Who's sitting at their desk not doing anything? Who's chatting with the AI about relationships? Like this stuff, you got to understand your CEOs, your upper level people have the tools now to look down and see everything you're doing. And, I think that ultimately that's going to be beneficial for them. And there's nothing illegal about it. It's a, private workspace.
I honestly think that's horrific. And maybe it's because I was in European companies for a while.
Yeah.
If your people are not performing, look at yourself. Look at your strategy.
Yeah.
Look at your management style. If you're into that level of micromanaging, that's Orwellian, man. I'm sorry. Like I would never want to work somewhere where the CEO is digging into everything you're doing during the workday. First of all, I'm not even a fan of the fixed 8-hour workday.
Yeah.
That's got to go, right? I mean, especially the hours I hold. I work better at night. Why do I have to be boxed into an 8-hour workday? I'm being a little bit radical here and provocative.
No, fine.
But I think we really have to fundamentally question this 8-hour workday. It has to be exactly between X and Y. And then you have these deterministic CEOs coming down, spying on their people like Xerxes, right? Like whipping the sea. And you think that's going to motivate people? That's fear, man. To me, that's not what business should be about. Business should be about, know the strategy, all the troops marching in the same direction because they believe in it. If you don't believe in it, you got many companies you can go to.
Well, let's talk about my favorite guy in the world, Elon. You remember when he took over Twitter and he came in with the kitchen sink and he demanded everyone get back to the office. And if you didn't want to, you were fired immediately. Like, I bet he's sitting up late at night, like asking Grok about what his people are doing.
Well, and there's a mythology around startups that if you're not sleeping on the floor in the office somewhere, you're not a true startup, right? Like you're not a true founder.
Yeah, Elon has a story where he showered at the YMCA for the first year or whatever.
There's a lot of bravado around that and projecting. I'm not sure, especially if you're running an AI company, which is supposed to automate everything. If you're working 24 hours a day, they have even phrases for this, as a startup CEO of an AI company, you're not eating your own dog food, right? Like, why are you not making yourself more efficient and productive using AI?
It's like Builder. I think it's Builder AI.
It's theatrical.
The AI company who had Indian engineers building everything for them instead of actually AI.
It's theater, man.
It's theater, 100%. And hey, there's a lot of money going around for AI right now, just all bird AI, new bird AI. So people are going to, we talked about last week, they're going to game the system. Yeah,
they're going to game the system.
Absolutely. Hey, you've just watched a clip from Show Your Priors podcast. Check out our main channel for full episodes. We have a new one every Tuesday. If you liked what you saw, give us a like and subscribe. It's free for you and helps us out a ton. Did we miss something during our discussions? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks, and we'll see you on the next one.